Aloha, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited to have my friend and colleague here, Fumie. Where are you in the world?
I'm in Estonia. Hmm.
Amazing. Okay, so I brought you on here to talk about a very challenging topic, and I feel like you have a very unique experience that you can share from a lot of different angles. I just wanted you to introduce yourself with your title and your background, and just give people a little bit of context about who you are in the world.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Fumi. So I'm a somatic therapist, and I also I'm certified as a parenting coach. So I like working with multiple generations, not always meaning that I work with a child and a parent, but I always have this kind of view of the person also as a child, as an adult, and who can be also, a grandchild. So there are multiple generations that's all within us. So yeah, I kind of work within that sort of um like what we're holding somatically, but also generationally. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, so I originally met Fumi in my somatic EMDR therapy course through the Embody
Mhm.
Lab, and I was just so taken by just her knowledge and her skills and the projects that she was working on, the stuff that she was doing, how she was living her life. So I'm very excited to have her here to share. And let's just jump right in. So, how would you define narcissistic abuse, and why, what makes it so difficult to identify early on?
I think, what we can say is that the narcissistic abuse is really characterized by the love bombing. So, being put on pedestal, being really loved, or it seems like we're really, adored. And then there is like some sort of like criticism that can set in, but once we are really hooked into the relationship. So initially, the person can really appear to be super caring, really loving, really interested in, who you are. But what happens is that they have really a keen sense of like really feeling out what the person wants, what the person needs, where their weaknesses are, maybe even where their strengths are. But they're not using those attributes to try to be a good person to them, but because they are only interested in, what can enhance their own lives in a way. But sometimes it can even be very unconscious because they're really operating from a place of needing to control others. So the person who's facing a narcissistic, person in the beginning could feel like, wow, this person really understands me. If you talk about your trauma, for example, they can appear very empathetic and, really in tune with what you're sharing. They really want to know all the details. They'll ask you questions and they'll, really say like, oh, I'm really sorry. Like, I really totally understand because they are lacking empathy, but they know how to act as if they have empathy. So I
Mhm.
think for the most part, many people really feel heard and as if, they have never met somebody maybe who understands them as much as this person does. So I think this is where it's quite tricky. Um, yeah, so the abuse really is characterized by, I think, a cycle of feeling really like, wow, this person really understands me and he really loves me or she really loves me, and then maybe a small criticism that might come in. But because we got so used to being, so loved and cared for, it's quite confusing to the brain. It's like, oh, what happened? I mean, this must be a small episode. It must be something that I did. So, and it never starts really like full on. And they have a sense of feeling out how much you would go, so how much they can push you. So, once they feel like there is a certain point which is different for each person where they can feel that you're totally hooked into the relationship. And it can be so many things because I know people who were in more or less healthy relationships before, and then they were, really successful. So it doesn't mean that because you got hooked into a narcissistic relationship that you were totally like a mess or you were really weak. I know a lot of people who are actually quite strong, but they can sometimes, not always, but they can sometimes find just that little weakness where you have a small crack and start working on that little spot, you
Mhm.
know. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. I definitely empathize with so many people who are in that boat. I had an ex who very much, very similar experience, and he uh, checked all of the boxes of everything.
Mm,
And I just instantly, he said, I love you within 3 months. He was just very, very into me. And then slowly it was just these little things of like, oh, you're cleaning wrong, or these other things that I'm just kind of like, oh, that's not that big of a deal. Maybe he's just used to this way. But if I do
mm,
this enough, then he'll see that I'm, working on X, Y, and Z. So yeah, it's very challenging, and I don't think anybody's at fault for, like, oh, glutton for punishment. You're out there looking for a narcissist, or you're looking for
mm,
someone to treat you badly. I definitely have not seen that at all with my clients who have experienced narcissists. They're usually extremely strong people and very caring and kind, and
mhm.
always looking for the good in people. So that's.
Yeah.
I was just curious, along those lines, we were talking. You had mentioned empathy, and I was wondering, why do empaths and trauma survivors seem to go repeatedly back into or be pulled into these types of relationships?
Mm. I'm thinking more specifically right now of if we have experienced trauma, especially in our childhood. And the trauma can be, we could think of, oh, I didn't have any trauma because my parents didn't abuse me, right? Or, nobody sexually abused me, or my parents are quite loving. Because sometimes we confuse this trauma with something quite big that happened, but it could be repeatedly that maybe my parents were very busy because they were trying to create their own business, but they were loving, but there was maybe some lack of like maybe connection that we felt a little bit lonely. In my case, for example, my mom, growing up, my mom had like really pretty deep depression. So although she was a kind person, there was always this sense of like, I'm not totally safe. Um, I'm not feeling totally seen because a lot of attention is going towards my mom. And my sister also had neurodivergency, and my parents' attention went a lot to her.
Mm,
So, not that I was really abused, but there was a sense of like neglect,
mm,
not intentionally. Um, so we could have those areas where we had to suppress our own feelings. So my need to be more, cared for closely, or my desire to connect more with my parents, maybe I had to suppress it because I had to be understanding to my mom, I had to be understanding to my sister. So I think there's often a pattern of somebody who grew up somehow needing to suppress slightly their own emotions and to think about other people first.
mm,
So an empath are also oftentimes growing up with kind of centered around other people and not always able to see what they need or prioritize themselves, which is, not like being selfish. It's just, being able to take care of our own needs and, our own well-being. So when somebody like a narcissist comes along and we are already wired to look after other people by suppressing our own needs and our own emotions, there is something that happens where they are really quite good at, like we were saying, hooking us into the relationship first. So we feel like, wow, this lack that we had of like being loved, it gets really like, wow, it's, filled in so much. I really want this relationship. But then when they start to really display their own needs, we can't see the switch because we were also maybe wired to not see our own needs so much
Mm,
and to focus on what the other person is requesting. So I think, there is something about this a slight lack of attunement with our own emotion that can become a weakness where they can hook into, to so this is where they push slightly to see how much they can go. And if you display like a sign of, okay, I'm going to listen to you before I look at myself, I think this is what they're really good at, like detecting in somebody else.
yeah. So, what are some of the most misunderstood aspects of narcissistic behavior? Like, what makes us trapped in this cycle? And I think you talked a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think what most people misunderstand is that like narcissists are maybe totally cold, right? And in some ways they are, but they also have learned, because this is their survival skill. They have really learned to really act as if they have empathy, act as if they can be really, really caring. So the person is constantly kind of confused because when we hear the definition, narcissists cannot be empathetic, because I think that's what we hear the most about narcissists. But I think what I see the most in clients is they go back and forth between, oh, but he did this last week or she did this, but she was capable of this, right? So they're constantly in this confusion because they can seem to be nice. They can seem to really have all the traits of somebody who's empathetic and have that language on top of it. So that's one part. And also a feeling that I think I get a lot from my own experience, but also from other people, the clients that I see, is that somehow if we explain a little bit more, they'll understand. Like, maybe I need to tell it this way. Maybe I need to explain to that person how much this hurts me. Maybe this, maybe this. So they keep trying to explain in the hope that the other person will understand. So, yeah, I think this is where also a lot of people kind of stay stuck in feeling that it's kind of like their own fault that they haven't explained well enough. Um, yeah, so I think those two are the biggest kind of misconception, I think, in my view, where I see a lot of people getting a bit stuck in that cycle.
Yeah, there's a bit of over explaining too. I know from personal experience, my parents who are so supportive, they were saying, you don't need to over explain to this person for them to be able to understand you. Some people just won't understand. And that was just really hard for me to conceptualize and even believe, of just like, no, no, this person's known me for such a long time. There has to be a way that I can get through to them, And
Mm,
so it was a lot of disbelief there. And in the end, I do feel that I was trying so hard in vain. So
mm,
that was really challenging. You had mentioned your own experience, and I don't know how much you want to share, but I just wanted to see if you, what you
Yeah.
wanted to share on that note.
hmm Yeah, so for me, actually the narcissist in my life is the father of my child.
Hmm.
So like I said, it's almost like anybody can fall into it. And what happened with me is that I've had my parents who died of suicide when I was 21. So that was a huge trauma that I had. And like I said a little bit earlier, my mom was depressed when I was growing up. So this, from this part, I was really doing a lot of healing work and I've really healed and I felt really strong. I felt ready to have a child. But this person came along and he was so empathetic, or so I thought, and really ready to have a family. And I felt so strong in myself that like I wouldn't fall into like I was clear about my boundaries. I thought I knew what I needed, etc. But for me, where it created this fragility is that it started to happen more openly after I had my child.
Mm.
So my like kind of this, fragile little crack is that because I lost my parents, I was so desperate to keep the family together. I couldn't bear the thought of my son not growing up with both of the parents.
Mm.
So there were little things that started to happen. And I thought, no, it's still worth it to keep trying because we shared this beautiful child. And, and by the way, some of the narcissists can totally be like really fun dad, like be appear to be super empathetic to the child. So it could be quite confusing where and it's on a spectrum, right? Like somebody can be like full on super narcissist, like what we would think about, and very grandiose, and but some others are quite subtle in the way that they come in and do the manipulation. And
Hmm.
I think especially if you're already quite strong and you have a lot of knowledge about trauma and different things, they're not going to play into like a strong way of manipulation because they can be called out pretty quickly. So it could be very subtle mind game that starts to happen where really ever so like it's really by little layer your confidence and your own sense of self can be broken down. So it took me a while to really realize that, oh, this person really doesn't actually really care about me or my well-being or what I'm trying to do as a family, right? Because it was always kind of back and forth. So yeah, so from my own experience, you know, even if we've done a lot of work and we know ourselves pretty well and we have a, pretty strong sense of boundary, this kind of thing can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry for your experience, and I
Mm,
appreciate you being willing to share. I think that, at that point when someone's showing their true colors, there's a bond that's already connected. And so I
mm-hmm,
was just wondering if you would be willing to share what does a trauma bond look like in this kind of situation?
mm-hmm, right. So I think, in the narcissistic kind of relationship, especially, so I want to speak about that one specifically. What happens is it's never like just straight out like abuse, right? There can be really moments where it's quite nice, or because they'll always try to do something to hook you in and then maybe destroy you a little bit because it's about the control. It's not just about like being totally mean to the other person. It's how well they can maintain that control. So the victim is always very confused. So like I said before, most of the people who do get hooked into this kind of dynamic has maybe a bit of like lack of maybe feeling seen, or they have like an emotional need that maybe they're not seeing for themselves. So when the other person really like comes in and gives us all the honey, we're like, wow, this just feels so good. So we're actually addicted to that side, right?
Hmm.
Not to the abuse. But because they go back and forth, and once they've like criticized you or they put you down and you feel really, really bad, and then they give you all this kind of like almost the opposite effect. It's
Accolades.
almost like it's not just a praise, but because you're coming from that low, it almost feels like paradise, even if it's not that much. So I think it's this kind of like I think they I read somewhere once that the nicotine, when for somebody who's smoking, it's not that it makes you feel that great, but because there's a dip after when you smoked and you come back up, it just kind of feels like it's so great. And I think there's something similar to the narcissistic abuse, is that the highs become lower and lower, but because you're feeling lower and lower, these little moments kind of like keeps you hooked in. Because they're breaking down your confidence, it feels like there's nobody else that can love you as much as they do,
Yeah.
because your vision is so narrow by that time. And you feel like you're not worthy of something that's better than what's happening in the relationship.
Yeah. And they'll even sometimes say that, where nobody's
Right.
gonna love you the way that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely had that a lot in my past relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
I, despite the fact of running a nonprofit and running a business, I just
Right.
thought I was down here and this person was up here. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so
And they might do things to try to kind of isolate you a little bit, or
yes.
say, well, maybe these friends, they're not really good for you, or they're maybe like not doing things that's gonna be, you know um they might be putting you down, or maybe they're not good enough for you, something to make you slowly isolate yourself, as if they're your biggest supporters, they're your biggest, whatever. And at the same time, they break you down.
Yep.
So and it happens, when we say it like this, it's kind of like, well, isn't it so obvious? But it's not, because it happens by just very small increments, right?
Yes. Um, well, so how do people heal from this? How do people recover?
Yeah. So I think this is where I really like doing somatic work, but also childhood trauma work. So as I defined earlier in this discussion, it doesn't mean that you have like a huge trauma. But because the narcissist, what we can get kind of caught up in is that this person is wrong. This person needs to stop doing what they're doing. They're wrong. And we become kind of hyper focused on what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. But
Hmm.
the thing is, there's still something in us which they were able to get into. So we can actually look at what's happening within us, and that's the only thing we can control. So I think most people, myself included, when we speak to, victims of narcissistic abuse, what we can often find out is like there were moments, even in the beginning or quite early on, that we went, it's weird. Like it doesn't feel good.
Yes.
But then we're confused. So we're like, no, no, it's not a big deal. He's such a nice person, right? Like for me, it was my partner. So he's such a nice person. But this little like it doesn't feel good in my body, like something happened, like my stomach tightened, or my chest kind of went like this. So there's something that we can remember, right? So I think in the initial stage, some people are still in the relationship, but maybe doubting, is he a narcissist? Is she a narcissist? Should I leave? Should I not leave? And so this focus is so much on the other person, but it's to bring it back to ourselves. And especially our mind can kind of confuse us, right? Because we're thinking about so many things. And what's the definition of narcissist? And oh, I don't think, he fits the category totally. So I think I can stay in the relationship. But
Mm,
the thing is, even before deciding are we staying, not staying, it's to look at like what's happening in my body because it's often telling us the truth, right? So it could be like, oh, like, this just doesn't feel quite right or safe. So how do we start, like listening to that more? And sometimes, we could be in a space where we're quite confused. So it could be really good to work with somebody who can hold space and start to like tell you how to tune in to your bodily sensations because it's, I mean, for me too, it was quite confusing in the beginning when I was trying to like heal from that part of my trauma. So I think having a safe person, so a good practitioner, for example, who is neutral, but who has that grounded, safe presence, because we have to relearn what is it to feel safe in the presence of somebody. And also, how do we listen to the feeling that we have in our body instead of trying to intellectualize everything?
mhm,
So I think, the beginning is to start to track how am I feeling right now? When this person said this, even if it feels confusing because maybe he's telling me I'm wrong or that he didn't say this or, whatever it could be that we're feeling confused about. But how am I feeling in my body? So I think starting to listen to that, journaling is not for everybody, but it could be journaling. For me, I've tried to journal so many times, but I do like noticing things and kind of like I take mental notes. So, spending a bit of time to be with ourselves, I think it's a very important aspect of healing. And like you mentioned in the beginning, I use like somatic psychology, somatic EMDR, um, and I do parts work. So I kind of look into, what's, you know, maybe if I'm saying, oh, but he's this and that, da 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 da, and another part is saying, oh, but this doesn't feel good. We can, try to listen to both parts, and maybe there's a third part. So starting to listen deeper to what's happening inside of us. So within the parts, within the emotions, and also in our body.
excellent. Yeah, I think that the journaling piece was helpful for me and just
Mm.
even just collecting data, like this
Mm.
time, this day, this was the conversation, because then
Yeah.
as you track it, you just see this long pattern of
Mm.
everything. And
Yeah.
maybe it's them saying that, that's not true, I didn't say that. But when you see, you know, so many times of
Mm.
them repeatedly saying that, and you in your brain knowing, no, he did say that, that did
Mm.
happen, those
Yeah.
events did occur. You have to start adding the pieces of the puzzle together, and that's
Mm-hmm.
really important.
Yeah.
So, along with those lines, we learned about this, and I mean, I'm sure you already knew about it, but with the somatic EMDR
Mm.
therapy, we talked a lot about the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious from your point of view, what the role of the nervous system has in the healing process, healing from a narcissist.
Mm-hmm. Right. So in our modern world, oftentimes our nervous system is registering threat, but not always like physical threat. Um, I think like you and me, we're not in a country where there's war going on currently, or I'm not being attacked. for example, physically by somebody. A lot of narcissistic abuse might happen more in like this emotional part. But the nervous system will still register it the same as if we're being physically attacked. Um, so it's more about this like danger signal that's going on in our nervous system. This is why I said, if we do this somatic work, even if we're not focusing on this narcissistic person, whether we're still in the relationship or out of the relationship, um, we can start to see, okay, right now, I don't know why, but I'm not feeling safe, right? Or I'm just feeling anxious. I don't think it's my relationship. I think it's just that I'm not feeling safe or I'm too stressed with work. Sometimes my clients say that, right? And so it could be that the clients are focused on the work that's too stressful, or it's my aunt who's sick right now and I have to take care of her, something like this.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it doesn't matter what comes up at the surface of the reason why we are feeling unsafe. It doesn't matter. We can still take a look at it because the nervous system works as this like whole system where no matter what it is, the stress is being felt. So I think it's just, if the client is saying, no, my boyfriend is fine, my girlfriend is fine, is to really look at that. And if it's that, if that's my narrative, that's fine too. So looking at what is stressing me right now, because the nervous system is trying to tell us areas where we can focus on, where we might want to heal. So the more, if, for example, it's really activated and it's at this height where we're really feeling like it's like this huge, massive threat, even if we are not in danger of like our life being taken, it could feel as though we are going to die as far as the nervous system if we keep feeling attacked emotionally. And so when we start working on this, we might really have like some kind of flashbacks where I might think of my mom, or I might think of a boss, or I might be thinking about an ex. It doesn't even matter, because the more we, work on the nervous system to the point where it can slowly start to come down, we start to embody a bit more sense of safety in our body.
Mm-hmm.
And also we start to remember what it is to feel safer or a bit more grounded. And so we can expand on that to see, oh, when this person is attacking, it's definitely different than when it's here, when it's really feeling safe and grounded. So I think in the healing, what I've really learned over time is that whatever comes up in the session, almost, we just need to work on it. Because sometimes I've had sessions where maybe the client was saying, oh, I wanted to work on this, right? And that person comes into the session. They start to talk about this. It's almost like, where are they going?
Yeah.
But I really trust that the nervous system is telling us what's happening. And oftentimes, even if they talk about 5 things that seem like they're not related, there's something that's related that brings us back to where the healing needs to happen. So I think the body is really intelligent, actually, and it's always trying to tell us how it needs to heal, but we're just trying to intellectualize something, or we've been taught by the society to like, don't be sad, don't be mad, don't be this, that, right? So we're trying to like push all these emotions away. But if I'm angry, I should be listening to this, you know? And if I'm sad, then I should be listening to this. And we can be both.
Yeah. Agreed. With that, how can people build that self-trust and that intuition back?
Yeah. So I think this is slightly related to what I was saying with the nervous system and also starting to notice what's happening within ourselves. Um, so the more time we spend validating how we feel, because with two people like you and me, we could disagree on something, but it doesn't mean that I have to act in a way that's disrespectful to you,
Hmm.
right? Where it's confusing is the narcissistic person would often, because they're very black and white, so what they think is right, if you say the opposite or slightly different, they'll really try to tell you that there is something wrong with you. And this is, I think, where, it works in a way that you slowly really lose your self-confidence. So I think the first thing to remember is that you have the right to feel the way you feel, or you have the right to like whatever you like. So whenever I have a sense that, I like this, but they're trying to tell you that that's not true, think about how it, like what happens in the body. And if, I do this exercise sometimes where I'm like, okay, let's think of things that we like. And when we start to talk about it, there's something that happens in the body or in our facial expression, like we become quite alive. Maybe the client is not even aware of it, but they start to, talk about something. And then there's like the posture that changes, their facial expression, energy changes. And we can contrast that to how did it feel then? Let's talk about this narcissistic person right now and what, they did to you maybe last night.
Yeah.
And this contrast, right? There's different truths for each person, and we each have the right to have our own truth. So how this feels in the body, this feels really bad. This feels quite like, expansive or joyful. So I think, giving these moments and really noticing, I think noticing ourselves is the key to both healing, but also to, rebuild that sense of self-confidence. And when the nervous system starts to feel like it's processing and it's going to a place where it's safer, then also naturally our self-confidence also returns.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And with building that confidence, I think a lot of this always goes back to boundaries. I talk to my
Mm-hmm.
clients a lot with my empowerment and empowerment self-defense clients who are either going through dealing with the narcissist or they're survivors of narcissism, and they feel like that piece of confidence is stripped away. We do a lot of rebuilding when it comes to boundaries, and I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, knowing what we need and what we want when it comes to setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I think I mean, not most, but a lot of times when people talk about boundaries, I think there's like a bit of a confusion because, people might say, oh, I put my boundaries, but they weren't listening to me, right? Like I told them my boundary, they don't listen to me. So I keep telling them what my boundaries are.
Hmm.
But the boundary is not for the other person to listen to or to start to respect. It's more like, do we respect our own boundaries? So if um if for example somebody's yelling at me, right, once, twice, and I said this doesn't feel good, it's not okay, please don't yell at me, and that person does it again, and it's so weird. I told that person what my boundary is. Like I said no, like you can't shout at me. But the thing is, to know this boundary, it's for me. So if once, twice, three times, this person is not listening to my boundary, because there's always like, nobody's perfect. So maybe not everybody's going to listen to or like, catch on to that right away. But when we share it, like, do they seem open to like considering this, right? Or do they just kind of like say, okay, but they're not like seeming so open to what you're proposing, right?
Yeah.
So listening to that, and I think, because I think, if there's like a disagreement or something, or I need to tell another person, well, this doesn't feel good to me. I want us to be able to talk about it, right? Like what just happened to me. I think we have to see, do they seem slightly or, quite open to talking about this? Or are they just being defensive, not wanting to listen? Um, so this is one way to see if the boundary setting is working. But if it's not, what do I do? Do I just stay and keep explaining over and over again the same thing? Because the boundary is actually for myself, that I have a value and I don't shout, at other people, and I don't want somebody else to shout at me. So I need to respect my own boundary and to remove myself from that situation or the relationship, And of course, I think nobody's perfect. Um, but once again, I think somebody who is working towards becoming, like a better partner, for example, or a better friend, will try to at least listen to you. Maybe that person shouts again, but when I bring it up, that person would immediately recognize that they have broken that boundary again, right? Like, they might say, wow, like, I know that we had disagreement. I'm really working on it, but I think I'm still getting triggered. They might have these kind of attitude where they would recognize that they have stepped over the boundary.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, this is resonating a lot. I shared this earlier in the course, but I talk
mhm,
about you teach others how to treat you.
right.
And also when you set a boundary, a lot of it is always for you.
Mhm,
If you have this boundary and there are consequences, then you are essentially setting this boundary along with them, but for yourself, and you
mhm,
have to follow through with it. And that can be the
right.
hardest thing, I think, is actually, okay, I said the boundary, they're walking over it. They've done this once, they've done this twice, they've done this 3 times, and I haven't followed through with the other part, the consequence of the
Yeah.
boundary. And so that's a very challenging place to be.
Mhm.
So
And
I
it's,
love that.
it's also good to um write out our own values. Not
Mhm.
even thinking about like where would I put the boundary, but like when I think about, what do I actually like? What are my values? Like what would I do to other people?
Right.
And I think because it's often empath or people who's had their own trauma, who fall into this type of situation, like a relationship where we get hooked into a narcissistic kind of system. um what happens also is I might have a value that I don't yell at other people, this disrespectful, but I could be thinking, well, this person had a lot of trauma, he or she's getting triggered.
Hmm.
I can totally understand. So we can really be understanding and still say, I know that you have like you're processing a lot, or XYZ, but you still don't get to talk to me this way.
Right.
Um, and I think this was quite confusing for me at one point because I knew so much about trauma and I know what that can do to a person, right? And so I'm constantly thinking, well, I do understand. I do understand that he might be doing this or that, right? And so even if I do understand, we can still draw a line to say, but I still also need to be treated with respect.
Hmm.
This self-respect, I think it's the most important part of the boundary setting.
Yeah, so true. I talk a lot to people about sharing, I understand or acknowledge how this person's feeling, and
Mhm.
and this is what I need. This is how I feel. This is what I need to do in order to support myself, protect myself, take care of myself, all of those things. So what kind of preventative tools could someone use if they needed to circumnavigate, because not every narcissist is the person in the, in a intimate partner relationship. It could be a friend who has been, a friend for your life, or it could be someone who's a family member. And then that's very challenging to navigate because you can't really be like, oh, I won't talk to you. Or maybe you can, but there's all these different consequences that go along with it.
Mhm.
So what could they do?
Um, I think the first thing for me is that, regardless of if we have like a narcissistic person in our life or not, I think just becoming more aware of what's happening to our own senses, like the nervous system, what's happening in the body. I think this is something that's not taught enough. Like, I think we should be teaching that in school or something, but, to become more aware of our own emotions and keep working on, little things like even just doing breathing. Often, I do some classes where when we arrive, we just do some breathing first. And even people who might be like, yeah, I had a great day, I was doing this and that, blah, blah, blah. When we tune in, just like 10 breaths, right? And tuning in, sometimes they really notice that there is like sadness there.
Mm,
There is grief there, there's anger there. So this practice, I'm not even saying like meditate for 1 hour, right? But just taking the 10 minutes, 10 breaths to say, okay, I'm just gonna sit here and breathe in and just try to tune into myself. I think having that little moment of my time with myself, starting with just 10 breaths, is a way to become more aware of what's happening to us. Because essentially, when we become hooked into a narcissistic kind of dynamic, we are tuning out what's happening to ourselves, right? So if even if if it's somebody who's not full on narcissist, for example, but there can be a dynamic where the other person is slightly controlling or maybe repeatedly saying things that hurts us.
mm-hmm.
But if we go too much into, oh, but I understand, they're stressed, or this is the work that's this way, or but we give a lot of explanation for what's happening on the outside, but we forget to tune in. So even just 10 breaths every day, or just, at lunch break, 10 breaths, um, or getting up, like I do 10 breaths, or coming back from work, I just do 10 breaths. It can take up maybe 3 minutes total over a lot, over a whole day. It does change a lot. Because we start noticing what's happening in our body, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. So what would be some early red flags? What are certain things that people can do to prevent being around a narcissist, or if they're meeting them and getting to know them, whether that's a friend, maybe it's a colleague or a boss, or it could be an intimate partner. What are certain things that they can recognize in those areas?
I think one of the, like I said, that person can seem very empathetic. So this is where we get lost. But when we think of narcissists, um, the part that's quite clear is when you have maybe even the slightest like disagreement,
Mm.
because they are quite black and white, very like they're very inflexible. So when they're pretending to be very nice and stuff like that, it could feel like they're very understanding and stuff, but that's because that's what they're trying to do. But if there's like the slightest disagreement, they will very often really stay rigid in how, like, they just like won't like they won't say stuff like, oh, I kind of understand where you're coming from, but this is just how I feel. They'll say something to the effect of like, maybe the language is not that strong in the beginning, but they might say, but what's wrong with you, like it shouldn't be
Mhm.
that way. you
Yeah.
know the language where you feel like your emotions or how you think, how you feel, these are totally dismissed. And it's like, but this is how I feel, right? Like, why can somebody else tell you how you should be feeling? So anything along the line of like, you shouldn't be feeling this way, or what's wrong with you for feeling that way, or yeah, any kind of dismissing of your emotions, I think that is a quite big red flag.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing everything. I think that this is such valuable information. And I just wanted to know, how can people get a hold of you or look you up? What are ways that they can find you? Obviously, if for those of you who are actively scouring the notebook, we will have this information, but I also would love to hear from Fumi.
Yeah, so I'm actually not very active on like social media. I do have some accounts, but I'm not very active. So I don't know if I should share that. I'll still share the link.
Yeah.
But where they can find me is my website. So the website is zentofu.com, but zen with a little hyphen. Is that called hyphen?
Mhm. We'll have it in
Zen
the workbook.
hyphen, yeah, tofu.com. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
Mm,
much. Thank you so much for your
mm,
time and sharing and your willingness to share your story and your expertise.
mm,
I think
yeah.
this is so valuable for everyone who's watching. Aloha, folks. So we're back. I was just chatting with Fumi after the amazing interview that she had, and we were talking about just the world in general and how in the United States, but also just in the broader globe, everything's very polarized right now, and there are a lot of these different traits that you are witnessing, and from different people who are in leadership roles, who are making different policies, or they are pushing for different policies in all different states all throughout the United States. And there are different world leaders who are out there who are showing these different traits that can be very hard for people to view. And I'm saying this from all different sides of the spectrum, right? Because we all have different beliefs, and I really honor that. I think that it's important to be able to hear just what you can do regarding that, and then just having Fumi share a little bit regarding different traits to look out for, because those are really important to note right now.
Mm, yeah. Um, I think, especially in times like this when everything is so polarized, of course, we can point the fingers at other people like right away, but I think we can also all start with ourselves and, do something. So, meaning that maybe we might have a different political view, right? Or we might have a different opinion on something, right? But when we start to be interested in the other person's experience. So I might say, oh, I think A about this thing, but you're thinking B. And I totally disagree. And, it might seem like there's no middle ground, like we just cannot agree on something, right? But when we start to say, you know what, I still want to get to know you, what makes you happy? What makes you sad? Um, what are the things that's important to you in your life? Other than this topic that we're really like, not agreeing on. And so when we start to all display that kind of quality as a human being towards another person, because after all, it's on some topics that we're disagreeing, but it doesn't mean that we have to act in ways that are so polarized. So I I try whenever I have somebody who might be triggering to me because they're saying something that just to me feels so outrageous. I might still go, if it's like a space that's called for, I might still say, you know what, like I really want to get to know you. And it's also a good test to see because sometimes we're so stuck in this political stuff, right? That maybe we're also acting a little bit in a triggered state. But when we calm down and we reach out to the other person, maybe that person also might start showing some like humanity in them beyond this political issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we do this, we also know some people who are totally incapable of going there. But because we are the first one who stepped into, okay, like let me ground myself and let me remember that this is another human being who probably has like, a family. They might have like a loving relationship. They have something that made them really, really sad, and sometimes through these things, we can really connect. So if I'm going there with that kind of grounded attitude, and the other person is still staying in that aggressive state like forever,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we don't have to diagnose that person, but we can say that, this person is not ready to connect.
Right.
We don't even have to judge them. So I'm starting to prioritize more like, do I want to just argue on something, or am I prioritizing the relationship? Meaning, even if it's not like an intimate relationship, it's a relational thing in every human being. So do I seeking some level of connection with this person right now, or do I want to argue?
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think, I'm coming back to what we were saying a little bit earlier, but just checking in with my nervous system, if I'm just like totally feeling like angry and just frustrated and like just boiling inside, it's maybe good to say, you know what, like I need a bit of time so that I can like cool down. But once I've done that, I've done some breathing, I check with myself, and if we've done a lot of work on ourselves, we could sometimes see, wow, this person, like what they're saying is really, really triggering my 6-year-old inner child, so I can tend to my inner child, right? I tend to that part. And then I can say, whoa, like I know that why you're getting triggered because it like, it's really pointing to something that was really painful, but right now I'm fine. I'm, an adult. I can still have this conversation with this person and be interested. So I think the more we do this, the world as a whole, can start with from us, right? Like to go a little bit in a better direction. So of course it's polarized, and we can say there are so many people who have that kind of narcissistic trait, but we can start from us. um the more we do it, we'll get to know what kind of person is not ready right now, you know yeah. So if they're not ready, you can probably debate for 6 hours, for 7 months. It probably won't change, but we can always say they're not ready right now, because it drops some of the judgment that we might have towards other people. Because as long as we're going to another person's space, like energetic space, with the judgmental side of us, they'll pick it up. So it's all about this energy kind of thing. So yeah.
Thank you for coming back on and sharing that. I just wanted to touch on it because I think that a lot of people are, pointing fingers at each other, and it's good to be able to take care of ourselves, but we're also doing a lot of name calling or labeling, or I've just witnessed that. I'm not saying people who are watching this right now, but what I am saying is that it's very important for us to be aware, the red flags that we talked about, and also if we are getting into debates that are very polarizing, just being aware of your energy. What are you willing to give? What are you not willing to give? Is this person willing to receive? Or are they not in a space to be able to do that, regardless of if they are showing narcissistic tendencies or not? Being able to take care of yourself at this time, because you are precious, and being able to support, when you support yourself, you can support other people around you, whether that's your family, your friends, the people who work with you or work in connection to you, or your intimate partner relationship. And when you are able to support yourself with these boundaries and support yourself with in these different dynamics, then it takes the power away from that polarization. And so I just we wanted to share that, just because the world is such a unique place right now. And so I'm very excited for all of you to take all of this knowledge and get that out there to as many people as possible.
Yeah. And we can start to feel kind of hopeless, right? When we're surrounded by this energy. So yeah, I think, one conversation at a time, we can be the person who starts to change something about what's happening right now as well. We don't have to always say, well, the world is this way, like it is, the world is in a pretty bad state right now. But we can start, by having one relationship at a time, because that's all we can do.
Thank you, Fumi. Thank you for coming
Yeah.
back on.